TPS software is a practice management solution that can be an essential tool to any growing accounting firm. But what is practice management? It can mean many things to many people. Time and billing, of course, makes up a large part of practice management, and TPS has over 300 standard reports that can provide information on employee productivity, firm billing realization, accounts receivable, and profitability by work, employees, clients, and partners. Check out our overview video to learn more about the time and billing features of TPS. But beyond time and billing, practice management encompasses client relation management, due date tracking, workflow, and document management. That's a lot to take in. So let's use an easy example most accountants can relate to, an S Corp with a December 31st year end. With this type of client, the accountant has to remember a number of things during that year that involves tasks assigned to him and several other staff members. Trying to manage all of that can get complicated, and people can get creative using a combination of Excel spreadsheets, Outlook calendars, and paper notes that follow the file around. In TPS, we have a very simple method, and we call it due dates. And there are several other features within our program that tie into our due dates, resulting in even more efficient practice management. So let's get back to that example of the December 31st year-end company. In the U.S., a December 31st S Corp needs to file their return by March 15th. So what that means to the accountant is that sometime in December, he has to notify the client that their year-end is approaching and remind them of the documents needed to complete the year-end and when they need to be delivered to your office. In January, the W-2 should be created and sent out. And then in March, the tax filing needs to be completed. So how would we manage that in TPS? If you go to the client side of things, it all starts in the Client Properties Due Date tab. Here you'll set up all the recurring tasks or due dates that you typically do for each individual client. For example, this client has 3 due dates or tasks. We've got sending out the year-end letter, asking for all necessary documents, preparing the W-2, and then filing the corporate taxes. Some clients could have 2 or 3 due dates, or others could have 6 or more because you do more things for them, such as we do their payroll, their monthly bookkeeping, and also their state sales taxes. So all of these entries in the Client's Due Date tab are basically the rules for what recurring work you do for the client and will be used to populate the due date calendar, which is similar to a big spreadsheet for the entire office to share. If you go to the due date calendar, by default, it shows all of your clients' due dates that fall within the current month. That's just the default, and you can always change the date range to see entries coming due in future months. So, getting back to the example of our December 31st S Corp, let's say that it's the beginning of December, and we need to get that year-end letter out. So here in the due date calendar, we can see that we have 4 clients that need to have their year-end letter sent out to them. TPS makes it easy to send those year-end letters by setting up some key things back in the client properties. On the General tab, we have assigned December 31st as the year-end for this particular client. You can also maximize functionality by setting up categories for all the services you provide your clients. For example, 1040, 1065, 1120S. That way you could make use of categories and year ends to filter your client list and send letters to just those clients that meet your filter. So if I go back to Tools, Mass Mailing Letters, which is what I'd use to generate Word documents to mail out, or Email Mass Mailing Letters, which I would use to generate an email with a PDF attachment, I can choose my category of 1120S, but I want to filter it down to just those with December 31st as a year end. I'm going to select my custom Word template for my year-end letter. And then when I click Generate, now I can create a PDF letter and attach it to an email for all 4 of these clients. Once I send the letter to the clients, I can go back to the due date calendar and mark these 4 lines as completed. And rather than going one at a time and marking them complete, I can use this icon to assign the same date as completed to all 4 of them with one click of the button. I can also use the traffic light icon to mark all 4 as a status of completed. Let's fast forward to January and we can see that our W-2s are coming due, as well as some payroll, bookkeeping, and some 1120 corporate tax returns. Now remember, the client ID, client name, engagement, work code, due date, hours, and description fields are all populated by the rules stored back in the due date tab of the client properties. But the rest of the fields, that's all information that your staff is going to be updating as we go forward. For example, when you receive the year-end documents from the client, employees can record the date that the paperwork was brought in. This may help you prioritize getting those clients' work out first that brought their paperwork in first. You might also want to add a note that all the documents required have been received. However, if there's something missing, employees can type in the notes that, of what you're waiting for, such as last month's bank statement. And that way, when you talk to the client, you have access to that information and can say, hey, we can't complete this until you bring in your bank statements. If this is something that's time sensitive, you may want someone to follow up with the client. So TPS offers a client log with alerts feature which supplements our due dates. In this instance, we know that the client was missing some bank statements. But did anybody contact the client to bring in the missing statements? Is there a follow-up date so that we can make sure action is being taken by an employee and it's not going to slip through the cracks? If you enter a follow-up date, the employee is going to be alerted about this until they enter a completion date on this entry. So we'll discuss client log in a bit more detail shortly. Let's say that because we're missing documentation, I know we're not going to file on time, and I need to file an extension. The extension filed field is where you could input the date you notified the IRS you're taking the extension. The extension due field is where you can input the new due date for this particular record, and I'll put in July 16th of this year. That way, when I move my calendar forward into July, this record is going to show up. Now that I'm in July, I can see this particular due date is still due, it's not slipping through the cracks, and we can get this done and make sure it's filed on time. I'll go back to January and I'll make sure that there's an employee assigned to this record, and I'm going to update the status to waiting because we're just not quite ready to complete it until we get all the information in. The Manager Preparer field gives you one extra level of staff assignment for the task. We'll look down at the bottom and we can see all of our bookkeeping due dates. Now, Samantha Moore is our manager who oversees the bookkeeping work, but we do have other employees like Harley Hansen and Bruce Howard that are actually assigned to do the work. Let's get back to our example of the 1120S client and move forward to March. Here we can see that our client brought in all the necessary documentation, and he brought it in on January 10th. When the documents were all brought in, the due date was assigned to the employee responsible and a status was assigned. Now that means when Alex comes into the due date calendar, he can filter the screen by employee to see just the work that is assigned to him. He can also do a secondary filter of just those items that are incomplete, so he knows what's exactly on his to-do list. If we want to see all, we click all, and then we also remove the employee filter. Once Alex is done preparing the corporate tax return and it needs to be reviewed, he can assign it to the next employee, Donna White. And then he can select a status like Review, and that means when Donna next comes into the screen, she'll be able to see that this is now assigned to her. So you can see that the same due date can be reassigned to 2, 3, 4, or 5 employees in the firm as it winds its way through the process towards completion. When the due date is complete, the last person who does the review or does the assembly and hands it into the client will mark that the record is completed and then change the status one last time. If at any time you need to email a client, you can simply click on the yellow email icon, add a subject line, and TPS will launch a new email in Outlook and log that the email was sent in the client log. So that's a simplified explanation of how the due dates work. Everybody in the firm gets to see what's outstanding, where it is in the process, and who is responsible for it. But because there are often multiple steps in the process of completing a due date, client log can be used to ensure that nothing slips through the cracks or off an employee's radar as you pass the job from one employee to the next. For instance, if you need to let an employee know that there is a task within a due date that needs to be taken care of, then you could select that due date, right-click, and choose Client Log. Client Log allows you to add a note and type in a description like Review 1065. Assign it to the employee who needs to be notified there's something that requires their attention. I'll pick Donna White, and I'll put in a follow-up date. Now, when Donna next logs into the program, she's going to be alerted that there is something in the client log that needs her attention. So I'll show you that when I log off and log back in as Donna White, she's going to get an alert that there's something in the client log that needs her attention. Here's the alert. And she's going to get this alert every time she logs in until she enters a completed date. The really nice part of due dates is that the record just simply moves along within your firm, just like a regular piece of paper would. In our calendar, you can track when it was received, which employee it's been assigned to, and where it's at in your process. Which brings me to the statuses. All of the statuses are self-defined. You get to create your own list of statuses or steps that your office follows. Then, when a task needs to move to the next step, you just reassign it to the employee next in the workflow until it's done and marked as completed. So you can see TPS is really much more than just a time and billing software. We provide the key tools for effective practice management that help you run as efficiently as possible. Be sure to check out our other videos that help you understand how simple yet how powerful TPS can be in helping you manage your practice. If you have any questions, drop us a line at support@tpssoftware.com or call our toll-free number at 1-888-877-2231.